I have a somewhat fraught relationship with home improvement projects. That's just the truth about me. We all have unique gifts, I guess, or not, as the case may be. One notable mishap that I had with home renovation happened about 10 years ago when I was tackling a long list of tasks trying to get a house ready to put on the market. One of the projects on my list was touching up the paint in the front panels of the stairway. In the house, there was this very pretty staircase with dark blue kick fronts on the stairs and beautiful oak flooring on the tops of the steps. Over the years, the front of the steps had been nicked by everybody running up and down the stairs. So I had been thinking, how am I going to fix this without repainting the whole thing? So I was so excited that the week before, I had discovered in the basement a can of the exact deep, dark blue oil-based paint that was on the kick fronts of the stairs. So one afternoon, determined to knock that out, I brought the paint upstairs, opened the can, mixed it well, and set it right there at the top of the stairs. Such a small job, I thought. Oil-based paint is so hard to clean up. Better just keep the paint in the can and use a disposable brush. Ease of cleanup. So I touched up the nicks, and I realized that to really finish the job, I was going to have to put on another coat. So I left the paint to dry as I got on to another task, cleaning out the attic. You know who it is when you're really in the zone? And I was just like marking things off my list left and right with a whole lot of delight. In the process of reorganizing the attic, I discovered the folding crib that we had used when all of our children were babies. The littlest baby was about to turn 9 then, so I realized I could get the crib out of the attic, give it away, be done with yet another job. So, with enthusiasm, I hauled the crib out of the attic and headed toward the stairway. It was in the next series of events that makes me think of the prophet Jeremiah. At the top of the stairs, the crib slipped out of my hands. I could see it in slow motion falling directly toward the almost full can of dark blue paint perched on the top step without its top on. Well, you know what happened next. The entire stairway, covered in blue paint, splattered all over the bright yellow walls, running like a river down the fronts of the steps and over the beautiful wooden tops of the stairs, step after step after step, all the way to the bottom. I stood at the top helpless. "Oh no, stop, somebody help me, catch it before it falls." Cries that went unheeded by anyone. No matter how loud I yelled, I couldn't stop the progression of events I could see happening right in front of me. For 40 years, Jeremiah had been doing the work of a prophet, which Walter Brueggemann describes this way. Prophets are called by God to have an impact on persons, to impinge upon perception and awareness, to intrude on public policy, and to evoke faithful and transformed behavior. Jeremiah's long career, as you heard, led him in and out of the palaces of 5 kings, rubbing shoulders with a lot of powerful people, telling the people that they were making God angry, and they were going to pay a price for that. He could see what was coming, and it was not pretty. But no matter how urgently he warned them, he couldn't seem to do anything to stop what was unfolding right in front of him. And things were bad. The Israelites had systematically turned their backs on God. They'd forgotten how God rescued them and given them an identity as God's people. They decided they wanted to do things their own way. They wanted a reputation among their neighbors, one that would ensure that they had all the things they thought they needed: wealth, prosperity, prestige, power, comfort. God was fed up. What God wanted was relationship with his people, but their memories were destructively short, and their imagination of their own importance too big for their own good. They created gods of their own intellect, their voracious appetites, their misdirected pride. They lived in relationship with God like you and I live in relationship with a new pair of shoes. Whatever works for the situation, that's the God we choose. That's the God we want. Whatever is easy, not too inconvenient, whatever it is that seems to meet our needs at the moment. The God who they used to know, the God who demanded selfless love of a neighbor, justice rolling down like waters, holiness in relationship with the divine, this was a God they just didn't believe in anymore. Too taxing. Destruction was coming. Jeremiah was watching it happen in slow motion with nobody heeding his warnings. What could the story of an ancient people losing their corporate way and paying a steep price for their hubris have to do with us? As it turns out, human nature is fairly predictable, and our own hopes and fears are not so different from the ancient Israelites. We regularly find ourselves making gods of our own. Gods of pride lead us to put our trust in politicians or economies or walls, all of which will fail. We like gods like nationalism and power. That way we feel better when we declare war or engage in military violence just because we have the most toys and we want to keep them. And the gods of arrogance allow us to view other people as less than we are, endorsing our institutional racism and classism and sexism. We could go on and on, couldn't we? And the prophets among us, like Jeremiah in ancient Jerusalem, are right to warn us that these priorities lead inevitably straight to destruction. Who is the God that we have faith in? The faith that found us is a faith that calls us to welcome the stranger, to open our hands to those around us, to work for justice and righteousness, no matter how much it costs us. This God would say, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Scholars call the passage we heard today in the video from the book of Jeremiah a judgment oracle, another warning to the people that laid out two different kinds of living. One way is when we set the parameters of our relationship with God, living lives and ordering communities based on our own pride. Another choice, Jeremiah says, is to live with faith. Faith that the way things are is not the way things have to be. Faith that chooses to order our lives with the justice of God. Faith that believes, no matter what the circumstances, that God's hopeful future is on the way. One of these choices, the prophet says, is stunted, barren, lonely, grasping. The other choice, healthy, tenacious, fearless, hopeful. The difference between the two is faith. Faith in the God who calls us to justice and righteousness and holiness. As many of you know, I grew up in the Hawaiian Islands. I'm pretty sure that Hawaii is the most beautiful place on earth, and don't argue with me. Growing up in the tropics means being surrounded by large trees with roots sinking deep into the moist earth, backyards full of delicious fruit to eat, mangoes and lychee and guava and passion fruit. Everything grows with abandon there, including banyan trees. Banyan trees are curious-looking plants. They grow with a big trunk in the center of the tree, and then they grow wide by extending their roots above ground, beyond the main trunk of the tree, and sinking those roots deep into the soil, all around them. The end result is a huge plant, huge, some as big as a car, as big as a house even, anchored deep into the ground with a vast root system that provides strength and stability during rains and winds. And the huge and intricate root system of a banyan tree is home for all sorts of creatures, mongoose and every kind of bird you could possibly imagine. And I can tell you from experience that banyan trees are magical places for children to play. So when I hear the prophet comparing faith to God, to the roots of a tree, in my mind's eye, he's talking about a banyan tree. But Jeremiah did not grow up in Hawaii. Jeremiah lived in a region of the world where there is little water and sparse foliage, so to invoke the image of a tree with such strong language, thick trunk, roots sunk deep into the earth, flourishing in the life-giving water of a flowing stream and producing fruit, wonderful, nutritious, sweet fruit. Well, this would be a powerful image to the people who are listening to Jeremiah. To find a tree in this region of the world meant to find oasis, life-giving water, rest, nurture. A tree, deep roots, strong limbs, life-giving fruit, a symbol of what comes with abiding faith in God. Now, it's likely that Jeremiah wrote this judgment oracle right before disaster struck, but remember, he could see it coming, and sure enough, it did. In 597 BC, the Chaldeans attacked Jerusalem and conquered Judah. For some reason that is not entirely clear, the king, Nebuchadnezzar, thought that the best way to secure his conquest would be to deport a large portion of Jerusalem's population and replant them in Babylon under his watchful eye. So that's what he did. He gathered a carefully selected group made up of professionals, priests, craftsmen, and the wealthy, and he took a group of 10,000 people to Babylon. The final fall of Jerusalem, the devastation of the temple, happened in 586 BC, 10 years later. They were left with this: a people displaced from their home, a city destroyed, the people who remained struggling with famine and disease. And for 70 years, the people lived in exile, divided. They struggled to maintain their national identity in the middle of a foreign land. They grieved the loss of Solomon's temple, a physical place that represented so much of who they were as a people. They suffered under constant attack and terrible living conditions. They struggled to rebuild their city and their corporate life. More than anything, they needed oasis, water, rest, life, nurture. All of the things that they had lost when they had given up on their faith. Jeremiah knew disaster was coming. He could see it happen. And he knew that when it did, the people could only navigate the hopes and fears they were facing by taking solace in their faith, deep, abiding belief that God would be with them, that God would transform disaster into something hopeful, that they could live together without fear in a society where everybody had what they needed and where they felt the nurturing care of a divine provider. Remind me again, what could the story of an ancient people losing their corporate way and paying a steep price for their hubris have to do with us? It's an inescapable fact that we are living in deeply fear-filled times in this country. Every single day, there's something on the news that threatens our faith in our country, our faith in each other, our faith in God. Even Christianity itself has become a sick and skewed tool of oppression in our country. In order to hang on and to work and to hope for a better future, to navigate the hopes and fears of all our years, we will need to sink our roots deep, to trust in God, as the prophet says, until the branches that grow and the fruit that is produced become the healing and the hope that we so desperately need. May it be so. Amen.